Welcome to the F It Bucket, a podcast exploring the realms of cybersecurity and our daily human interactions with digital innovations. I am Alex Gallegos, a systems administrator.
Ashley Keski, cybersecurity specialist.
Paul Ruffalo, cybersecurity consultant and teacher.
And we have a special guest with us here today. I'd like to introduce Bill Harper.
Hi, I'm Bill Harper. As he said, I am the Senior Manager of Identity and Access Management at New American Funding.
Glad to have you. Thank you for joining us here and taking a little time out of your day to talk to us a little bit more about the big wide world of identity and access management. Also, thank you for picking up on my I Am introduction. I don't feel like anybody else latched onto that, so thank you. I feel like you're going to fit right in here. It's going to be great.
I had a joke prepared to thank you, Bill, for popping our guest Cherry, but that already happened. We had a guest already. I was thinking this morning that you'd be our first guest, so I'm still making that joke, but it's just not correct.
I don't think it was correct anyway. I'm not necessarily sure that that's the thing that we want to do, but well, either way, we've definitely gotten it out of the way now. So that's good.
We don't have to consider Camille as a guest.
I know him well enough, so it's okay to we'll just wipe him out. That's fine by me.
Yeah. We'll just say friend of the podcast for Camille. That's fun.
There you
go. So for those who haven't for those who haven't glommed on already, our topic today is indeed identity and access management. I did want to touch on this one article that I found earlier on today because it fits in definitely with something we talked about last week, 2 weeks ago for our release schedule, but I think might kind of come up again as we talk about our main topic today. I just saw this story out of Singapore about a fired employee who accessed a company's computer test systems and just went in and deleted a bunch of servers. They said the 39-year-old man was, quote, confused and upset after being fired, and he deleted 180 virtual systems from this environment because his access just was never revoked, and he caused, in US dollars, $678,000 worth of damages. Only sentenced to 2 years and 8 months in jail in Singapore. Which honestly I would say probably got off easy.
Isn't that where they cane people for doing stuff? Like even mouthing off or flipping people off? I've heard stories like that.
I haven't specifically looked into the Singapore legal system to determine if that's the case, but it could be. I don't know. But yeah, he apparently he logged in. It wasn't just like, one drunken night either. He wrote a bunch of scripts in order to do it and tested them and accessed their system 13 times. And then on March 18th and 19th, ran his programmed scripts to delete 180 virtual servers on their system one at a time. So this script just went in and deleted machines one after the other. Delete, 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 delete.
Can you imagine being the person on call? Like, why is everything going down?
Yeah, I can. I've been that person. It fortunately was never another member of our team taking stuff down. It was just bad updates, but it's not a fun feeling. And yeah, I don't prefer it.
So the gist is employee fired, disgruntled, figures out a way to get retribution and spends probably several weeks going through that process, and yet he still had access.
I was going to say, I think that's the gist, is that nobody ever thought maybe we should turn off this admin level person's account and make it so that he can't log into this system anymore.
Right, as they're being walked out of the building or
before,
I guess,
ideally.
offboarded. Right. Yeah, right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So really just nothing more than confirmation of exactly what we said in our episode a couple of weeks ago, where they had discovered in that study that a lot of people still have access to systems that they had when they were employees, and that, unsurprisingly, it's a really good idea if you automate that offboarding process. This continues to be true.
Mm-hmm.
That hasn't changed in the last 2 weeks, and if it was going to change, it wasn't going to be a retraction. But it's now here we go. There's some concrete numbers that you can put to it, as opposed to the article we discussed last time, which was basically abstract ideas of things could be bad. Here's an exact concrete example of a time that it was bad, and you probably don't want that to happen to you. So yes, automate your offboarding process, and if nothing else, please notify somebody in IT when you fire people.
Yeah. And to kind of give you a little bit more even context with that, if you guys, I wish I had the article with me, but the Okta breach that occurred about 18 to 24 months ago was actually a similar type situation, but it was actually a contractor, third-party management, and he actually sold his credentials after termination to a black hat group, which then in turn went in and caused chaos in the Okta system. And that's when a lot of the data was actually released and customers were contacted. Todd actually had to, the CEO of Okta had to come out and apologize for that event, but blame the third party for the transaction. But nonetheless, you know, it's extremely important to be able to monitor not only your employees, but contractors even more heavily so than your general
How much
staff.
did he sell his creds for?
I have no idea. they never talked about that. That was they were an India-based contractor that sold to a Russian group.
I think it was the FBI cybercrime report that was released in January. Credential harvesting is the number one worldwide cybercrime that they identified, and oddly enough, a single set of creds typically sells for a couple $100 is all on the black market, is what that article noted. No, this was the CrowdStrike one, actually. It wasn't the FBI one, the CrowdStrike report. And I saw that number and I thought to myself, it's only $200 per credential? That seems really low.
It does, but when you take into the fact that a lot of these individuals that are selling, they're being dismissed or removed from the organization to begin with. They're just trying to get anything for their dollar before that account is shut down. And we've actually had that conversation with CrowdStrike.
Oh, okay. Because even in the report, they were talking about attacking entities acting as credential brokers. So when they go buy them, it's a couple $100 per entry, and I don't know what they're selling them for. After that, like actually on the market itself. So that's interesting.
I was at a talk down in Colorado Springs. Jason Haddix, who's a pen tester here locally, was talking about how when he's doing his engagements, he will actually go onto the black market and spend a couple $100 buying creds and seeing if he can get in that way.
That's pretty cool.
Pretty crazy.
I guess not cool. It's unfortunate that could be that easy.
Exactly.
Cliff note, be careful who you piss off.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Love you guys, by the way. You're all smarter than me.
Well, and that just brings up a topic of standing privileged access to begin with. And that's been a really hot topic this year. I know, Paul, that was kind of the part of the discussion you wanted to get into was, why is identity hot at this point in time? Is a lot of the times that access is just, it's always available for these individuals at a standing level, and it's never removed, even upon termination, whether it be human accounts or non-human accounts. It's always a factor that people have to look into, and, whether it be rotating secrets or standing privilege, it's one of those things that generally isn't taken seriously at a lot of organizations, unfortunately, and it's starting to cause more chaos. Every week we see somebody else.
And as we kind of transition into our main topic, would you, for the benefit of our listeners, define what IAM, as in identity and access management, really means? Because I feel like that's a term that has only really started to be talked about within the last several years, as opposed to let me ask that a different way. How does IAM differ from the way that we did access management in the last 20 years?
Well, it's really transformed in a lot of different layers, but primarily, IAM, for the last 20 years really has been more of a development layer or a development structure where, they concentrate more on the SIAM, the consumer facing side of how to protect an identity and what you need, how you're going to manage that, how you're going to manage their identities, what kind of data, where are you going to store the data, what type of data is in there, PII, non-PII, whatever the case would be. It's the point now where it's kind of transforming more with SaaS, the SaaS infrastructure of creating a more inclusive from workforce to SIAM on both sides of it. So they're kind of merging into more of a singular entity than having that separate structure. A lot of people have a hard time adapting to this, but it really means that identity is really becoming one big picture and being more cloud focused other than, your typical on-prem. So in the past, when you look at on-prem Active Directory, even 10 years ago, you would see the service desk or desktop support or even system engineers, system administrators handling identities, where now because of the way that SaaS is being handled and there's so many different areas of concern, you're taking both the SIAM side and the workforce side and merging them under one infrastructure and one group and really controlling those environments in different ways.
Are you saying SIM?
No, SIAM.
SIAM?
CIAM, Customer Identity and Access Management.
Okay.
So so SIAM is a term that we use for that. So you're more on customer focusing. Sure. So it'd be like external users, and then workforce I use for internal purposes. So your workforce would be your internal users, your SIAM would be your customer users, and realistically in the past they were separated. You had two different teams, you had different structures, you had database teams that would kind of manage it, and now identity is really being kind of orchestrated and brought together. So if you want to talk about logistics around it, you have, for instance, Ping Identity, which is someone that I'm very close with. They are customer focused, and now they're focusing more on the workforce side. And then you have Okta, who was actually more on the workforce side, who bought Auth0, right? And now that's more on the customer facing side. So you're actually seeing this merger of identity through these on both sides to kind of combine them and be able to track. And not only that, it's much more focused around security than it ever has been. And we can go into details a little bit later, but when a lot of people think of identity, they think of just provisioning and deprovisioning. But the realistic truth is that it's a lot more security focused on how people are logging in, where they're logging in from, what type of MFA process do you have? Do we get rid of passwords? We move to more secure methods, device posturing, and those are all different things that we can get into later. But it's really taken a turn from more of just this is an identity to we need to protect these identities and monitor them in real time, and we need to do this in the workforce and the customer side.
So can you, I guess what I wanted to get into was just what the complexity of an IAM architect, analyst, engineer, whatever role you're going to put on that person or label you're going to put on that person, the level of true complexity that's there. Because as Ashley and Alex mentioned before, when I was going through my job hunt, I did and I still see IAM as probably one of the highest paying roles in the space. I mean, there are some postings out there that are well over $300,000 a year. And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, if you're an architect or a manager or, really frontline, what warrants that kind of pay scale? Like, is it perceived risk at the entity? Is it truly that complicated? Maybe it's ignorance on their part. Maybe it's ignorance on my part. Or maybe I just managed to find some roles out there that are just over and above the norm. But I'm just curious if you can unpack that a little bit from your perspective, and then also kind of dovetail in the components of the job and maybe what a week in your life might typically look like.
Well, yeah, first and foremost, it is a hot space right now, so the market value is higher than realistically probably should be. And that's, it happens. And anytime there's a kind of a sector that's getting targeted, and just to kind of give you some kind of background information on that, I'm just going to give you some numbers. Chase Bank, they get hit with about 15 billion with a B attacks a day in the identity sector around phishing, right? So you get into an area, and the company that I work for, they were breached about 7 years ago now, before I came, which is why, we're building this team. And, their back end pay for a single day of being down was $7 million. And that was 7 years ago. So a peer of ours actually got breached the first week of this year, and their payout from that attack was $25 million, not including the cost of cybersecurity insurance. So the problem that we're really seeing, Paul, is in this industry, and the more conferences you start to see, is a lot of people like to feel like they understand the day in, day out of identity and how to manage it. The reality is it's still a very new venture in the industry. So the reason why people are paying so well in certain areas is because they're really looking for that expert. And if you look at some of the postings, they've been out there for 6 months, a year and a half, because they're looking for that unicorn. And the problem with that is it's very hard to find. And we're all still learning, but the reality is, when you start interviewing in this space, and I just got done interviewing and going through transition on my team and bringing new people on, is that a lot of people don't know the space as well as they say they might. Sure. So when you start talking to people, whether, like I said, at conferences, you really start to get an idea of how much it needs to still happen, right? So to kind of give you an example really quickly, my week. So we have, several thousand employees. We have, in the end of the day, tens of thousands of active customers that are logging into our systems. And every single thing that we do, we track internally within our structure. And then we transfer that over to a SIM, but we're actively monitoring our systems. So password spraying is a huge issue right now. It's affecting the entire industry. There's been no secret about it. It was talked about at RSA, Black Hat, any big conference that you could go to at the moment. And Microsoft is trailing, right? So my day could be, okay, who's getting attacked today? Are there any successful attempts? Are there any movement around it? And then what can we do, or what could happen if they are breached, right? What would happen if now a password was successfully logged into? What would be the next piece of that? And identity is, like I stated before, much more on the security layer than it ever has been. So, we use different tools such as posture management, such as ITDR, which is identity threat detection response, as well as combing through our logs to find out how they're logging in, where they're logging in. Are they getting to the MFA layer? If they are, what can we do to block that? What's being blocked? And making sure that the end user from all of this doesn't know a single point of that. So that's the tricky part, because what you're seeing is a lot of individuals in this area, they get in it and they're putting in tools, but they're slowing down the process for people to authenticate. Right. So I have to find a balance of having no impact to the company, but also protecting the company at the highest level, especially for a financial institute. So my job is really week in, week out, identifying potential threats, making sure they're blocked, as well as, continuously keeping updated on what trends are happening at the moment. Like the password sprays that's really started late last year, we're working day in, day out. How do we block those at a proxy level? And that's something that no one's really been able to discover yet because it's all API calls, right? So it's these are different tools and different things that, we see that in the past identity really never had to worry about. It was kind of on the security layer where the people that would handle identity just kind of backed off. So that's kind of the difference these days.
Yeah, I always fear that you get the executive or senior leader that says, why do I have to do this stupid MFA process? It slows everything down, and then you end up having to have that conversation with them, which hopefully you typically win. Because, it's not a silver bullet, but it's certainly better than not.
Yeah, and generally speaking, it's best to have legal and the senior level on your side, right? Yeah. I'm very fortunate to have a CISO that's very in tune with what's going on in the industry, so it allows us individual freedom to kind of take responsibility for what's going on, and also supports us if something is happening and we need support from an executive level. We have that support. And unfortunately, Paul, I know you've kind of seen this probably a little bit in the past or more recent, is the CISOs have been taking the fall for a lot of these breaches. Right? It's not the executive level, it's not the CEOs, it's the CISOs. And I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, but the CISO of Uber is a primary example of that. So somebody actually had a conversation with. So it's very interesting where the blame is falling, and because of that, we have to also cover ourselves at every angle as we can as well. So we actually have to, take risk assessment, and I actually have to put up risk assessment to the highest level of our executive board and legal department and say, well, this is a risk. Are you going to accept this risk? If you are, then I'm not at fault if something were to happen. Right. And that's something that's luckily happened a little bit more often now, but unfortunately there's a lot of executives out there that they don't want to take the blame if something were to happen, right? They want to point the fingers and say, well, the team didn't do it properly, so they're the ones at fault.
Well, it's amazing how often I'm seeing that same advice repeated, even at people that do, even aimed at people rather, that do not work at organizations, anywhere near the Fortune 500. Just people working at small companies in a sysadmin role that are constantly running up against needing to make updates or even not being allowed downtime in order to install critical security patches, and being told by their fellow sysadmins over and over again, make sure you send a notification up to the highest level in the company that you can realistically communicate with and say, my recommendation was that you do this, and you are refusing to do it, so that if somebody ever tries to pull you in front of a jury at some point in the future, and by the way, print that email out, take it home, and save a copy. It's just insane that you have to do that, just so that if somebody tries to come back years later and say, oh, well, Alex didn't run critical Windows security patches on this system. Yeah, because you wouldn't let me. Or because I asked for budget for an endpoint protection system and you denied it 5 times in a row. But it's shocking to me. Like, I understand from a standpoint of trying to figure out the root cause of an incident, but it's shocking to me how many times even the media is just out for blood. It's like, whose fault? Which nerd can we put their face on the screen and say it was their fault? This person did it. This person is responsible for all of the credit card information from Target being leaked in a major data breach. And the answer is, realistically, a lot of things usually had to go wrong for something like that to happen. It's not just because, one person clicked on one wrong button one day and oops, all the data's gone. Like, it's always a series of bad decisions in a row that ultimately leads to disaster.
Yeah, and you can really look up, if you don't know who Joe Sullivan is, the former CISO of Uber, right? That is a unique story of him. Now, he spared prison time, right? But the point is that he was, leadership. There's a lot of things that were outside of his control that happened. Not that saying he's completely innocent. When you get things reported up to you, you have to take action yourself. But the whole point is you have to address all areas. And companies are unwilling. They don't want to take the fall for something. Right? Especially if they're a public entity, their stock's gonna fall. There's a lot more costs initiated with it. So going back to even Paul's question earlier, why is it so important? Well, specifically if it's a public entity, companies are now willing to spend a lot more on identity protection than ever before, primarily because, if they get hit, it's not just, paying ransomware or resetting or getting things back up and running. There's so much more cost, whether it be cyber insurance, legal fees, other risks that, even with having staff now that you have to pay, there's just an enormous amount of cost that would actually associate with that.
Yeah, the integrity is the intangible one that you never really know if you're going to get back to where you were before. Obviously, in Target's case, I think they're doing fine. But I think in most cases, the unfortunate fact is that breaches are becoming so common that it's not necessarily an it's when it happens, and then how you react. I think that's why you look at the market and what happened with LastPass a couple of years ago, and just the way that they didn't really react and pulled the wool over the people's eyes. It's like, well, this is a business case on how not to react, and I know they continue to lose market share because of it.
Yeah,
and yeah. I mean, a lot of people have, even from an enterprise level, where we don't work with them. In fact, we barred them from our infrastructure. I'm not afraid to say that. It's just, it is what it is.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And you're right, Paul. It's a matter of when. Like I said, we were breached a few years ago, about 7 years ago, which seems like a long time, but it's really not. The reality is 3 of our biggest competitors and one of our biggest partners were all breached in the last 6 months.
Oh. So now everybody's part of the club.
Yeah. I mean, we're a smaller mortgage broker, all things considered.
Sure.
But we're still top 15. We'll be top 10 in the country after this year of mortgage broker. And the reality is, Mr. Cooper, Loan Depot, and First American Title all got breached within the last 6 months. And we're very close with them. We talk to our peers a lot, even JP Morgan, Chase, Wells Fargo. We keep very close communication with our peers in all of these markets, and it's amazing to see how much everybody's getting targeted at this point in time.
Yeah. That's what when Ashley and Alex and I worked together, we did a kind of a training lunch and learn, and we were trying to impress upon our staff that the point isn't that we're the best in the business, or we will be. The point is that we're really all part of a global battle. And like I didn't get a chance to serve in the military due to a heart condition. And so not being able to be a soldier has always been in the back of my mind. And now I look at this like, well, it's an opportunity to join a global workforce of the good guys, right? Where you're essentially responsible for protecting people from the attackers and from themselves. And it's great to hear that you guys are really doing that in your own industry, where yes, you do compete, right, for customers, but you're still trying to work together to help the greater good, which is great.
Yeah, and that even expands beyond. I mean, obviously I'm here in this podcast as well, but we absolutely reach out to our peers. I actually had 3 meetings this week with different peers from different companies that just want to discuss. It's not, what's the better product, not trying to sell, but what are the standards that you guys are using, and where can we all figure this out together?
Sure.
Right? Passkeys are a big conversation right now. How to utilize passkeys in a secure manner. right? So that's a big discussion, and it's great to be able to talk to peers and have those discussions. I don't want anyone to get breached. I don't care if they're the biggest competitor in the world. You don't want it to happen, right? These are people's lives that are at stake, including people that have the same job as me. So anytime they get breached, it's gonna look down as the industry as a whole, and you obviously don't want that. So it's best to have certain levels of cooperation between even your competitors, and have that just on the table. And that's something that we do really well, and I'm very thankful of that. And having, again, leadership to allow you to do that is a big piece of this, right? And you have to be cautious what you say, of course, but the whole point is that we're trying to work together to the common goal, of being successful. And that's a big piece of of being able to just talk to each other and have those open conversations.
One additional question I had, and just maybe some learning for our listeners. What do you see as the key components or building blocks of IAM?
Right now, it really is not only the identity itself, but real-time security prevention is a huge piece of IAM at this point in time. So what I mean at that is, I'm going to use the term ITDR, which is Identity Threat Detection and Response. And this is a talking point that I've spoken a lot on in the last couple of months with industry leaders, including CrowdStrike, Netscope, Ping, Okta, Obsidian, Vesa, so many more. But the idea is, how can we protect your identity in real time? What does that mean? And the piece that Alex showed earlier, there's kind of a couple parts of this, and I'm going to go a little bit more technical now, right? But the idea is, what can we do from our side to make sure that your identity is secure, whether you're in workforce or you're a customer? From a workforce side, we take it a little bit more strict, right? Just because you potentially have a lot of access. So the merging of identity and PAM is obviously a big piece right now. So what does privileged access management mean? What does identity access management mean? What does posture management mean? Those are kind of three areas that we're looking at. So the first thing that I do, Paul, specifically, is I really look at where people are logging into and how they're logging into our environments. So this is something that we've been working on well over the past year now with our partners, and CrowdStrike is a huge partner of ours. Very proud of that, actually, on posture management, right? So the idea is, how can we prevent somebody to even attempt to be able to log in? We're a passwordless shop. What that means is we don't use passwords in our environment. So it's even more, more of a risk. But on the flip side of that, we can use posture management. So how are you logging in? All right, are you logging in from a machine that's authorized by us, or are you not? It's going to read the CrowdStrike data. It's going to posture that, make sure that it's appropriate, call back to CrowdStrike, allow you to move forward, and then be able to authenticate in without another layer of another layer of authentication, such as password, right? So now we can just do MFA. So now we introduce passkeys in that. Well, the realistic approach is you type in your username. It does all those little things in the background. It checks your computer, checks your posture, checks your browser in real time, right? This is all real time posture check. And then goes to Face ID with Windows Hello. Logs you in, boom. Within 10 seconds or less, you're in. And from the end user perspective, they see nothing. From my perspective, I see what computer they're logging in from, what that machine has on it, where is it located, was impossible travel questioned. So if they're logging in from New York now, and now they're trying to log in from California 30 minutes later, these are different signatures that we're going to call to be able to block those. So when we talk about identity, everyone thinks just it's you, right? It's Paul, it's Alex, it's Ashley, right? But the reality is it's so much more than that. And we're in real time responding. And when I talk about ITDR, which I said before, It's actually that last letter that means the most to me. It's the response. How are you responding? Because if you're doing it in a fashion where somebody gets in and for 15 minutes they have full access to your system, well, all they need is 15 minutes of access with a script for somebody to respond, and all of a sudden everything, you're down, right? Or you have 189 machines that are now removed. Right? So it's the biggest topic for me is the response. I don't want a response that's going to be an alert like we've had in the past, right? You get a phone call or a text message or something along those lines for your alert functionality. I want that system to automatically respond.
You didn't see my email? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Right?
No such thing as an urgent email.
That red exclamation point doesn't do anything.
Right. So the whole idea behind it is, and some people don't like this. They don't like it at a senior level, specifically if it's going to shut down an individual. But you know what? I would rather have it respond and automatically kill that account, that individual, until somebody can recover and take a look and see if it actually is a security risk, than have it open, right? So that's what I really mean by response.
And in your case, is all that automated? Most of it automated? Or does it take a human to validate?
No, ours is completely automated on that front. The next part of it is standing access, but we can get into that later. But from our automation side, we do work with vendors. We work with CrowdStrike, Netscope, and others to go through this posturing point, and Ping One is a large part of this, because their solution actually allows us to manage all of these things internally, so we don't have to do as much externally. But all of that is in real time. So right now we can actually detect all of that structure, and we can physically shut down an authentication attempt before the user is ever even breached, and we can actually shut down that account in real time. And you'd be surprised on how much pushback we get on that. I truly mean it.
Like, you get pushback in the fact that you can shut down an attempt?
Yeah, so a lot of the what they call SSPMs, which are security posture management tools, or an XDR, right, or ITDR, they don't like to write back. I think a lot of it is they don't want to have the responsibility of shutting down an account and then taking blame for it, whether it be a legal action or a concern about write back into a system. They would rather send a PagerDuty alert or a Teams alert or a Slack alert and go, this person's, do something about it. You take action. Think, well, that's not what I'm paying a lot of money for a solution for. Mm-hmm. So, part of the partnerships that we've had is making sure that we do have that real-time response management. Like, we want that to be in real time. I would rather wake up to an alert or an email, Alex, right at 10 a.m. or 9 a.m. in the morning saying this person's account was shut down due to a potential threat. And then, sure, they might not have been able to work for the last 5 hours if they're an overnight person or somebody in a different time zone. But the reality is you're going to save the company a lot of money, right?
So is your pushback the solution provider, the workforce entity, or the customer entity traditionally?
Traditionally, it's been more of the solution. So your vendors actually don't want to handle as much of that as you would expect. And it's a funny thing to say, right? But the reality is a lot of these people that are creating ITDRs, or identity threat detection in this case, they don't want to have right back into your system. So the response portion is, let's respond via PagerDuty. Let's respond versus, an email, or you'd be surprised at how much they don't want to take that detection and then right back into your system itself. Luckily, companies like Valence, who something we're working with right now, and also CrowdStrike is a very big proponent of this, of let's take action immediately before something were to happen. I know it's a funny thing to say, Paul, and it's something that I've had a lot of discussions with, and we've actually turned down vendors because they didn't want to have right back into our solutions.
And that's, from your standpoint, that makes perfect sense as a stance. I can I guess I can also maybe imagine some pushback from like leadership of the business. Like I'm thinking back to some of the leadership that I've worked with that used to get on our case if somebody's account was disabled and shouldn't have been, in the event of a false positive a couple of times. And, our stance was always, we took the action that we felt was necessary in order to protect the company and its interests and prevent a costly downtime event. And the only thing that I think I can safely say, without giving too much away, is after we had experienced some costly downtime, all of a sudden a lot of that pushback went away, which seems to be the case a lot of the time.
Yeah, and luckily I will say, I have a very close relationship with Ping Identity in this case, and this is actually something that's really true to their heart. And, that's part of the reason why they now just merged with ForgeRock in that case, because if you, we can go into the IGA side, which is another area that I work on, but maybe another day if you guys ever want me back. But point is that there's so many different levels that you have to go through now. And realistically, I keep going back to security, but I want low impact from our end users. In fact, I want them to be easiest. From my perspective, the way that we have it set up, right, for them, they're like, wow, this is so cool. This is so easy. I type in my username, it pops up, Windows Hello logs me in, or fingerprint, or in some, if the device doesn't allow it, okay, so it sends a push notification to your phone, right? And in the back end, I have layer by layer, I can see every step of the way in data form on how that transaction is taking place, right? And we have had multiple situations where, we have people that travel, right? They go to France or they go to, Spain, and all of a sudden they go, wait, why is this blocking me? It told me to contact the help desk. And, it does block them or, notate it and send us an alert. And we go, well, because you didn't tell us you were traveling. This is, not improved, it's not approved travel. So therefore, you're going to have to contact us. Now, we do allow travel to certain circumstances, but, the idea is we don't know who's logging in. And I can tell you, Alex, it's funny because the first time that actually happened, we have co-owners, and they actually went to Italy and they couldn't log in.
Mm-hmm. And they didn't tell anybody they were going, though. So
well, they did, but they didn't tell me. And the reality is, these are my environments. I own these environments internally. I don't care if you're the president, the CEO, or you're the janitor. It doesn't make a difference to me. You're going to go through the same cycle. And they actually appreciated that in the end. But they just, they didn't know, or, changes were made, and they're busy people. So the reality is, I'm thankful to have the understanding of them, but it is kind of funny. In fact, my CISO went to Peru, which was a banned country on our list. It wasn't even approved, and we knew he was going. And he went down there, and he actually contacted. He said, "I can't access my email." I'm like, I don't care. You didn't tell me. You didn't tell me you need an email. So, of course, I lost that battle because he was my CISO. But what's unique is I can turn on specific application usage, and that's one thing that makes a difference here. So if I want to do just email, he doesn't have to access to all the privilege systems. I can say, okay, well, you're in Peru. Here's your email. That's all you can access. Mm-hmm. And these are all advantages of the way that we have it set up. So we can really determine in our entire environment what people have access to at what level.
That actually is kind of the next question I wanted to ask anyway. So that's perfect. You're great at segues. You're hired. You can be the co-host anytime. Talk to me a little bit more about how you build out that profile for, okay, great. I'm Alex Gallegos. This is exactly what I have access to. These are the systems that I can access, what data I can have access to. Is that in terms of just where that data is located, or whether that data has how that data is classified, whether it's PII, PCI, etc.
Yeah, it's kind of a combination of both, but we really, we are cloud centric, I guess you could say. So, I'm not going to go into too much, but Enter ID and AWS, a lot of our structure is. So, we have different teams kind of managing different access in those environments right now. So depending on what title you come in with, what role you assume, what projects you're working on, all of those can determine different levels of access. Even with ping identity, which we actually use for now both workforce and customer. So our developers actually need to have certain levels of privileged access in those environments as well. You get into the topic of how do we handle it right now? Well, it's a lot of manual work right now, Alex, and that's a downside. IGAs are a big proponent of this. So your SailPoint, Savient, ForgeRock, those that are kind of been around for a while, ReadyBots, and you see a definitely a trend moving in other directions as we speak, and we've had a lot of conversation about that. So what we're doing right now is, a lot of people know just-in-time provisioning from a past of you click on something, it's going to create the account somewhere, and it's going to allow you to be able to log into those environments. So you talk to a lot of older system admins, and that's how they perceive it. So right now it's a lot of manual audit work, and a lot of manual work in general. Like, we have team members just kind of focusing on it. That being said, we are in the transition right now of more focusing on just-in-time provisioning throughout our privileged access management through our entire infrastructure. So what I mean by that is we're working with a vendor. We're actually working with somebody that just got bought out by Beyond Trust. Everybody's buying everybody these days. You can find it yourself. But, the idea is that we want to build out no standing access to any of our environments. So that is the long-term goal of this.
Oh, wow. So
you will have an account. You'll be able to go and request access to a certain environment, whether it be anything within Enter ID, AWS, Ping, even, our virtual machines, however you would want to move it. It would all be privileged access through just-in-time provisioning. So you'd go in, make a request, it would grant it for 2 to 4 hours, depending on, or however long that they feel that they would need in order to manage that. And then after that time frame, it's all logged. Some of it can be automated through device posturing, right? Again, we go back to that term, right? So now it's checking your posture, making sure that you're who you say you are, and then from that point, just giving them access.
So if you're accessing at the right time from the right place from a company-owned device, maybe that request is automatically approved and it doesn't need to be.
Exactly. That's exactly what that's exactly what we're implementing. We'll put it that way, right? So the idea then is that privileged access now, you're removing that standing privileged access. So you talk about somebody getting removed from the company. Not only is it automated from all the way from the HRIS all the way down. So if HR removes them, their general access is going to get removed, but then their privileged access is no longer standing anyways. Therefore, it's always rotating, right? Or they would not be able to gain access to those systems because you could flag that immediately based off of their status of their account. On top of that, it's secrets management as well. So rotating secrets.
So Alex mentioned one thing in that company-owned device. What if it's not a company-owned device?
Oh, that's a great question, and that's something that we've had to tackle, and that's primarily because of contractors, right? How do we manage that? What other types of structure can we implement? And sometimes it's as simple as doing additional password check for depending on the user. So I could tell you that. We do also have contractors that are overseas that in this case, I'm not comfortable with just having up like a password as additional check. So believe it or not, for that group, and I'm not going to go into names, but for that group, they have to be under specific IP, which is within their internal office. So then on top of that, so if we can't do a posture check on their device itself, it's doing an IP check from their office. Well, I do know that can be spoofed, and obviously there's some concern around that. It's at least giving me a little bit of comfort to be able to check where they're logging in from.
You're at least perceivably controlling that session, maybe for lack of a better term, because then that traffic is managed by that IP, but you still might open yourself up to issues if they take that machine home, do other things on it while they're at home, and then bring it in. God forbid they get a keylogger on it, right? And then when it goes home, it can call out and ship the keys that were keyed during the session, and then who knows what you could get access to.
Yeah, and that's definitely something we've thought about as well. And trying to remove our footprint with those environments is one of the biggest tasks. So we've actually been hiring directly overseas instead of working through contract companies because we're trying to remove that footprint. We don't want to have external machines on our, on our environment if we don't have to.
Yeah, I have to give Ashley kudos because she's one of the only people I've watched work with multiple devices and she's like literally physically segregating work from personal. Seen it, and I think that if everyone did that, this wouldn't be a problem. But I mean, she's in the 1% that's doing that. And I like from a business perspective, you look at like one example, little bit of a segue or distraction here, rabbit hole, whatever. I mean, I've watched small mom and pop law firms where they use their email as their filing cabinet, but they also use that same computer for their personal stuff. And I'm looking at it like, what the hell are you doing? This is just a whole matzo ball of no, can we not do that? And I don't know. I don't know if there is a solution for conveniently segmenting work from personal using the same device. I mean, there's solutions out there that can do it, but they're not necessarily cheap or easy to maintain.
Yeah, and one of the solutions that we've been really looking at is enterprise browsers as a whole.
Yeah.
So it's not the best solution, Talon or an Island, and we've been working with them, right? They're great solutions for certain environments, but an enterprise browser is one way that we've been looking at tackling that, where you have to, in order to log in, you have to have a controlled browser in order to be able to access these resources.
Or Zscaler if you have really deep pockets.
Well, we actually use Netscope for that.
Oh,
that's actually
okay.
So, we're very, very in tune with Netscope. So that's a very, big part of this. But again, these are agents that you have locally on your systems. And sometimes they don't want that, end users don't want that, specifically if you're a contractor. So how do you approach that in a different manner? Well, at some point in time, it's more of a forceful thing. Mm-hmm. And you just have to kind of take it into your own hands and saying, okay, well, if you're not going to use our equipment, well, here's the rules. Now here's an enterprise browser. You have to log in through this. And then we can use Netscope. We can use other solutions for that.
Mm-hmm. I know one of the major selling points of moving to a cloud-first architecture, especially for file storage and everything, is kind of the idea that it's accessible from everywhere. First of all, I'm going to make the assumption that with this level of control over logins, that you're not allowing people to log in and access their file shares from the business center at a hotel. So first of all, is that a true assumption at all?
No, we absolutely do allow remote connectivity.
Okay.
You have to in this industry, unfortunately. People are traveling all the time. We are a mortgage broker, after all. So there's some limitations that we have. With that being said, again, that's where the more of the physical device posture check comes in. So IP addresses can change randomly, so you really can't assume that you can check just by IP address. Right? We're checking the physical worker agent or the user agent on the computer. We're also checking the the CrowdStrike authentication So CrowdStrike is actually doing a validation on every login that we have. And going forward, it's even going to do more so. So if it is a user that, say, just me, that takes my personal computer and goes over, well, I can't log into my privileged access unless I'm on my work computer. And that is a...
Okay.
But to be able to travel, absolutely. Like, we are remote shop. I think, especially post-COVID, you kind of have to be a little bit flexible on the remote structure of things, which it's kind of the world we live in now. You can't depend on an office at this point.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah,
And
not anymore.
I would absolutely...
The castles have turned into unmanaged tents.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would absolutely expect people to be able to travel, but that's still occurring with their work-owned devices, right? What I was more thinking of was, this Microsoft's big selling point is, just go to any internet-connected computer in the world and go to office.com, and your data is there. And I'm assuming you're not giving people quite that level of access. Is that true?
That's true. The harder thing to manage is mobile devices. And that's probably the biggest thing to overcome is how do you handle mobile devices, right? Most companies don't want to pay for a mobile device. But in the state of California, if you state that you have to use a mobile device for work, then you're required to pay for it. Then the company's required to pay for it. So we have to come up with kind of fun things around that. But on the same side of it, so we don't have a full MDM, right? On the same side, we have to allow people to be able to access via, email and maybe Teams for their mobile device. So,
right.
How do we manage that? That's always a tough thing to kind of go through. But we can limit, and actually we do limit the level of access they can have from their mobile device, which makes a big difference. So you can't access privileged, your privileged access is not available to you on a mobile device, for instance.
That makes sense. Gotcha. So the heart of my question then is, how has the non-technical workforce reacted to, like, is it easy to get people on board, or do you have a lot of grumbling, or is it somewhere in between? And if you've got people pretty well on board, what was the secret to getting user adoption of all of those policies?
So I'm going to kind of go into a little bit of a success story for us, so I'll make it brief.
I love it.
Right, so we actually transitioned from one IDP to Ping. I'm not going to bring up the name of the IDP, but you can probably figure it out for yourself. We just don't like to go into things publicly.
Sure.
Point is, though, is that we made that decision with a 60-day time frame to move over 120 applications in a very short period of time over the holidays, which is funny because... I'm pretty sure I'm cursed on the holidays at this point in time. This goes back to 2015 with Ashley. So I could actually blame Ashley for a little bit of this. She probably, I don't know if she remembers that backstory.
Which one?
The certificate's expiring on Christmas. And Camille and I and one other person, not to be named, we're all working on Christmas Day trying to get the company back up and running. So I don't think I've had a Christmas off since then. So I think I'm just cursed at this point in time. So that was our first year at that company too, actually. So we kind of adopted that, right? So it's funny, it just happens to be Camille that was helping me there. But point is that we had a 60-day time frame to move over 120 applications, whether they would be, SaaS apps or internal, or having internal shop. And we were able to do it. Not only were we able to do it, but the end user experience and that transition went up. And this company's been around for about 15 years. And the overwhelming response was this is the most positive transition or positive move that they've ever had in the company.
It's awesome.
That's incredible. And kudos, because that's an impressive project in 60 days.
But the end result, and you were asking how the end users take this, they actually, when you make it easier for them to get in the end, sure, they might have to download something new on their phone. Sure, they might have to, get used to going to a different web page, things like that. But when you try to find this balance of, okay, well, now I have a tool that's going to make it easier for you to log in. You don't need your password after the first time, right? Now you can forget about your password to be able to log in. You can just type this in, it goes to your phone, everything's done in the background. Like, wow, this is a lot easier, right? Now they look at it going, well, this is really cool. So it's funny. The one thing, though, that they actually took offense to, believe it or not, was the fact that I required them to put a password on their phone to be able to use it for authentication. So I didn't get a ton of it, but I would say a good 5 to 10% of the company as a whole were complaining that now they had to have a password protected phone in order to use it. And you'd think of all things that would be the least concern, but hey, it is what it is.
Yeah, I can't even remember a time where I didn't have a passcode on my phone.
Yeah, and then it's an opportunity to educate them to say, you should anyway.
Right.
Exactly.
I mean, you just ask general questions like, so email and pictures aside, you probably have 1 or 2 payment options. So if someone were to just get and open up your phone, they can start running up charges if and when they want to, among other things.
Plus, do you have a browser history that you maybe don't want somebody to read? Like, just...
Well, even the browser history... Right?
That's just you, Alex.
I mean, people store their credentials in their browser, right? Like at Chrome, right? So you open up Chrome, all of a sudden you look at the browser history, then you go to their banking website because they don't have the app installed because they're not tech savvy or whatever the case may be, and now you're logging in from your phone. Like all of that data is there and readily available to them. So yeah, it is an educational thing, but it is funny. That was the biggest complaint that I actually got.
Wow,
that's funny.
Well, if that's what you're running into, that's amazing. That makes the onboarding process
but I think
so much better.
Really speaks to the idea that we've certainly talked about internally as a group before. I don't know if we've necessarily touched on it on the podcast, which is that obviously there's this idea that security and convenience are on a continuum and they're on opposing ends. And that's been a talking point in security for a long time, and it's never going to change. But it doesn't change the fact that if you make life easier for people instead of harder, it's going to be much simpler to get them to come along on the ride and be on board with the changes that you're trying to make, which is not really a revelation, I suppose, in terms of human psychology, but a good reminder for us all the time.
But it is definitely something to consider when going to different levels of your CFO or your senior leadership, asking for additional cost, additional budget for something like a new tool, right? And that's something that when I ask for a new vendor or ask for a new product, is not just how this is going to make me secure, how this is going to actually make this more convenient for the end user. And we're actually doing that right now with a new, password management tool. Things like that, where you'd think we're switching from one to another, right? But at the end of the day, it's actually allowing me to do more passkey work. It's allowing me to do more security, and it allows me to do more autofill for certain areas where we can't currently work on. So you're going, okay, well, it's going to cost you a little bit more money, but these are the benefits that you're going to have. It's actually going to make everybody's life easier. And that's something we do a lot of. So I'll work with internal teams. I'll get a POC or PRV, whatever you want to call it these days, proof of value, set up and running. And I'll work with the marketing team. I'll work with the HR team. Go, you know what? Set it up for them entirely. Now go. And the response is, generally speaking, it can be negative at times depending on the situation, but it can be overwhelmingly positive too. It's like, okay, this actually made my life a whole lot easier. Well, now we can move forward, do that to our CFO and our CEO to write off on and go, okay, well, this is not only a better security tool for us, but it also benefits us from an end user perspective as well.
That's awesome.
We're in an interesting paradox right now because I think at the end of the day, we all know that passwords are not the right solution. MFA is a benefit, but can sometimes be cumbersome and not really solve the problem you're trying to solve. Then you go to a password vault, which can be helpful, but to general people, sometimes it creates complexity because if the autofill doesn't work, then there's problems there, right? But if you go to pass keys, and you're really leveraging, like what you said with Windows Hello and the capabilities there, it becomes so simple, it's almost disgusting, but it's more secure. And that we haven't been in that space really ever.
No, we haven't.
It's kind of fantastic if you think about it.
Yeah, the biometric functionality these days compared to what it was, 5, 10, 15 years ago, even 2 years ago, has come such a long way. And passkeys has been a buzzword now for 2 years, really, since, Apple introduced it within Mac OS, right? But the whole idea is that, now that Windows Hello, Android OS, Mac, they're all kind of at that point. We even had to adjust the cost of purchasing hardware. But again, you go back and go, it's going to cost you $70 more to get the Windows Hello camera solution along with fingerprint, for facial recognition. But look at the benefit of it. Or let's go out and buy some cameras, Nexago and Logitech have really good camera solutions that are $40, $50, $60 where you hook it up, but you can sit down in front of your computer and it just automatically logs you in, automatically logs you into your IDP. You just go forward and it's much more secure because if something happens to that computer, it gets stolen, lost, it's all localized. You're not talking about a separate MFA factor that even a YubiKey, as much as a YubiKey is nice, if your laptop gets stolen, it's YubiKey protected. Well, they can just touch the YubiKey and get in, right? It's just a key at the end of the day. So,
but you could do a bio YubiKey, which fixes that issue too. So, I mean, it's still multiple factor, but those multiple factors are a lot more complicated to steal. It's not just your device, right? You've got to have your face, your fingerprint, plus the device, plus all the other attributes you're talking about, like where am I logging in from, all those things.
Even MFA bombing is really a big thing right now. MFA fatigue is a huge problem to have, and that's something you just prefer to get away from entirely.
Many a pen test exposed that.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll admit fully that this is an area of weakness for me that, I tend to, once I've kind of made my mind up about a technology solution, I tend to consider that decision set in stone, even though I know I shouldn't. But to your point, Bill, that it's changed so much just in the last 5 years. Windows Hello is a good example. When Windows Hello came out, it was awful. Like, I won't make any apologies about it. Like, people were fooling it with printouts of people instead of their actual faces, But then Apple comes along with Face ID with the LiDAR, and it's like, I trust Face ID, but I still, to my mind, Windows Hello is still the broken, half-implemented solution that it was 5 years ago, when realistically it's improved a lot since then, since we first evaluated it and looked at it, and it was a joke. And it's not a joke anymore, but I still, in the back of my mind, have this sense of dread around it, where it's like, I don't want to touch it. It's broken. It's not good. And I know that's not true anymore, but it's just such a hard mental hurdle to get over.
It's interesting that you say that, though, and I'm not going to bring up too many names here, but the FIDO2 Alliance, or FIDO Alliance, right, they had a very hard time with Windows Hello for the past 2 to 3 years. Like, they would not approve it. And it really wasn't up until the last 3 months where they felt it was up to par to be able to allow it in a FIDO2 controlled environment. And,
What's FIDO, for those that don't know?
Fast Identity Online.
The point is, they did not feel comfortable. And we've been having these discussions. We had it actually with multiple IDPs, including Microsoft Security, which everyone says that shouldn't be a real thing. Those two words don't really go together, right? But the point is, we actually just introduced it in our environment, and that was after extensive testing, Alex, like really extensive testing along those lines. And frankly, we still even only have it at a certain level. So, we are adopting it. We're looking to push it out to the entire company here very shortly, but I would say it's probably less than 20% right now of our company's allowed to use it. That's really because FIDO2, the FIDO Alliance really over the last 90 days has finally gone an approval process where like they feel comfortable enough with it after extensive testing.
Gotcha.
And that's something that was talked about a lot at Identiverse this year, which for these that don't know, Identiverse is a cyber art conference in Las Vegas. So this year they had over 5,000 participants. So it's not a huge conference, but not small either. But the whole idea is that, pass keys, just-in-time provisioning, ITDR, which identity threat detection and response, and then the posture management were kind of the topics of discussion this year and how to adopt with those. So actually, Windows Hello, they were there and they were really showing off some of the new subset and security parts that they had along, how to make sure you are who you say you are, because AI is a real thing now, right?
Yeah.
So it's fun to try to play with it and try to put a portrait and things in front of it and move around. I haven't been able to break it, but that being said, I'm not as talented as some people. I can't model like Ashley can, so she might be able to hack it a little bit more than I might be able to. But point is, 3D printers, things like that. Ask whatever the case may be. But
oh, there you go. I wonder if you could do like a screen printed mask, if that would work. Probably not. I mean, you'd have to have a pretty similar facial structure as whoever you're trying to mimic. But I only say that because I saw, it was probably a TikTok or something this morning of someone in a boat that had a mask on, and it looked like a real person, but then he like pulled it. It was like it wasn't him.
Are you sure you weren't watching the movie
mask.
Face Off with Nicolas Cage?
No, or Mission Impossible with Tom Cruise, where, by Mission Impossible 12, they all had fake faces.
Even Windows Hello now, I don't know if you guys know, but even with Windows Hello now, we'll look for face movement. So if it's just a still image, it's actually looking for you to move slightly to identify who you are, right? And that's something that Apple's been doing for years now, even though you might not know it, but now it's actually it's trying to identify that you are actually a real person. Doesn't mean you can't mimic it. Like, I don't think if anyone's really going to get in that, if they're really trying that hard, somebody's going to probably be able to try to get in, right? But point is that for the vast majority of people, I think it's a pretty secure environment now. And like I said, Ping wouldn't even support it up until about 2 months ago. So it goes to show you that how far it's kind of come.
Mm-hmm.
I've done very little research on this, but one of the things that I uncovered in a workshop the other day was there was one employee at a company where it had a medically diagnosed shallow fingerprint, which made it harder to read their biometric and get them enrolled into Windows Hello.
I've never heard of that before.
I was like, well, that's something you don't predict. And they figured out how to deal with that. I think they maybe because the company that was doing it, they had YubiKeys with a fingerprint with a PIN or a password, and that's how they kind of enrolled them into the IDP, and then they went and then they would do their facial recognition on top of that. So their primary authentication is Windows Hello with the camera. If that doesn't work, they can use their key. If that doesn't work, they can still use their password. I think that's kind of the way that they were doing it. So, that particular person, once they got around the enrollment with the shallow fingerprint, it was a non-issue. But, it probably took them a little bit to figure that out.
Interesting problem to have.
Yeah.
But I think facial recognition is kind of, I think realistically, it's getting better. As we move along, I think that'll be the preferred method, just because even fingerprint, like I use facial just sitting down on my computer, because all I gotta do is sit down on my chair and it just goes, right? But the point is, fingerprint is more widely adopted in a lot more machines, and the technology's been more secure over the last decade than facial recognition has been. So that's part of Windows Hello, is you actually need to have the hardware to support it from a facial recognition side. If you don't, then Dell and HP have made a lot of progress along with Microsoft in this, but it's going to take time to get that hardware out and available to everybody.
Now, I think the most important topic that we could talk about is, Paul, you said you were watching a TikTok this morning? The guy who recorded a whole episode about how the federal government should ban it?
You realize TikTok pops up in Facebook, right?
Oh, okay. So a copy of.
So maybe it was a
TikTok.
real.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not that age. I'm not using the right terminology.
Oh, okay.
Jeez.
I am of the age that I watch the TikTok reels on Instagram. So I just wait.
See? Might have even been that way too.
All right. I rescind my.
I'm at the age where my daughter tells me to watch the TikToks and actually sends me TikToks that I refuse to actually have on my phone. She actually doesn't have TikTok either, but she watches shorts on YouTube and says I should be watching them as well. I'm like, yeah, you're too young.
Isn't that funny how everyone's complaining that TikTok might get banned, yet what they don't realize is the replacement for that already exists. So
Shorts exists on every platform.
quit the whining and put your effort. Yeah, it's like, seriously, I don't get it. Anyway, there's Karens everywhere.
It's true. Well, as always, we like to end our show with some irreverent recommendations for what we've been entertaining ourselves with lately. Bill, as you are our guest, we'll start with you this week. Have you watched anything, seen anything good lately? What's been entertaining you when you're not working with identity and access management late into the night?
Well, lately, I just got back from a trip from Japan, so I've been kind of more in tune with the Japanese culture lately. So nice. I've watched Shogun probably 3 times now on Hulu.
Excellent.
So excellent series. If anyone hasn't watched it, it's incredible. And I do play games. I'm a gamer, so kind of watching the new news. But I play a lot of Hell Let Loose right now. So kind of a World War II shooter. So on top of that, I got 2 kids. So that's my life. That's my wife. I have a very lovely wife too. So yeah.
There you go. Perfect. Paul, how about you? Watch anything good lately? Any more weird documentary murder series?
No, not on that front this time.
Okay.
Although we did just get into Dark Matter, which is a series on Apple TV. The lead actor was in Warrior and some other things, and the premise is that this physics professor during the first episode is trying to figure out how to put things in superposition, and lo and behold, it turns out that a version of him figured out how to do it and then abducts him.
Oh.
And now we're on episode, I think, 8 or 9. It's still going, so we haven't finished it yet. It's pretty interesting. So it's a good sci-fi. It's kind of there's another Netflix series that I watched some time ago called Altered Carbon.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of in that same realm. It's very, very sci-fi, very mind melding, and it's one of those where you have to pay attention, otherwise you'll get lost. Like, which version of him am I looking at now, and why is he doing this? So it was good.
Cool. Ashley, anything good? More flooring videos on YouTube?
Yeah. I am trying to remember the name of it. It was a series. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Tosh from Tosh.0.
Oh, yeah.
Daniel Tosh. He has a new kind of, it's called The Goat. And Camille talked me into watching this reality show. And there's, I don't know, maybe a dozen or so folks from all different sorts of reality shows, none of which I had ever heard of or watched, except for Love is Blind. That's the only one. And they're all competing to be the goat, and you get like this golden goat, and then it's a little bit of Survivor mixed in, where you vote people off who didn't compete well in challenges.
That does not seem very you.
Of course, Daniel Tosh's.
Tosh's.
No, right?
You got talked in.
This is not something that I would normally watch. 100%. But yeah, it's worth a watch if you're just looking to mentally check out.
I have been watching YouTube, and I've been watching that viral video that Jenny Nicholson did. Is like 4.5 hours long, because that's what YouTube is these days. It's just people talking for longer than a Ken Burns documentary. And she did this video on the abysmal failure of the Galactic Star Cruiser experience at Walt Disney World.
Oh boy.
And it is absolutely incredible. Just how Disney managed to screw this thing up at every opportunity, from advertising through execution. It's like, this is a thing that I was like, oh man, that'd be cool. I'd maybe save money up and go to that sometime. It's out of business. And before I could ever even think about trying to put a trip together to go to it. And they just, oh man, they did such a bad job. And also Pillargate is real. For those who've seen the video, they'll understand. It's the whole thing. So
I live in an hour from Disney, and I didn't go.
Yeah, I think that's about all we've got time for. We've run a little long already. So I think it's about time we wrap things up. So until next time, thanks for joining us, and remember, once again, balance is key. Otherwise, fall on your ass. The F It Bucket is hosted by Ashley Keski, Paul Ruffalo, and me, Alex Gallegos. We're edited and mixed by Alex Gallegos. Our theme song is Limit 70 by Kevin MacLeod. Our special guest this week is Bill Harper. Bill, where can people find you if they're interested?
Well, they can find me on LinkedIn, working for New American Funding, and it's under William, not Bill, but you're more than welcome to connect with me.
Great. Now, this is the part of the outro where I would normally ask you to review the podcast. And hey, make no mistake, I'm still going to do that. But also, you know what? I'm doing it. I'm opening the floodgates. And I didn't even talk to my co-host about this either. I'm just doing it. This episode was so much fun, and I enjoy interviewing people who know a lot more than I do about really cool topics. So if you either know someone who would make a good guest, or if you are someone in the cybersecurity industry who has an interesting topic that you really want to talk about, consider this your RFP. That's request for proposal for those who aren't hip to all that cool, slick marketing lingo. Drop us a line and let us know. And beyond that, as always, if you want to engage with us, you can find us on social media. We're on X at the F It Bucket, that's EFF. Our subreddit is r/the F It Bucket, and you can email us directly at thefitbucket@gmail.com. Our next episode comes out on July 4th. That's Independence Day itself, and we hope you'll grab a beer and a burger and watch some fireworks. But then also, when you're done with all that, we hope you'll be here with us. But until then, these 4 enthusiastic amateurs with a microphone and a dream are signing off.
What's FIDO for those that don't know?
I can't even remember. I'm part of it, and I don't remember the acronym. That's probably not saying much.
There's too many acronyms in the industry.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I've said it that way for how many? I don't remember. Federated? It has to be federated.
Yeah, it's funny. You even go to their website, and it just says FIDO everywhere. It doesn't even say it anywhere. So
that's exactly what I'm looking at.
I don't remember, to be honest with you. So this is a little embarrassing because.
Sorry, I will look it up while you're talking.
Fast Identity Online. Fast identity.
Okay, so I'm just going
online.
to cut out all of us waffling about what it is, and Ashley's just going to swoop right in when Paul says, for those who don't know, and then Ashley just attacks with the answer, like, out of nowhere.
Yeah, that's a little embarrassing for an IAM expert that actually talks to these guys.
It's all good.
Daily,
That's
right?
okay. We always have an outtake at the end of every episode, and I think we found it, so we're good.